Hello everyone, my name is Emily and today I'm going to go through all of the watercolor art supplies that I currently use. Pretty much the only art supplies I use because I'm pretty much just a watercolor kind of gal. I just want to get this disclaimer out right now that I'm not trying to brag by showing you guys these art supplies. I have built up this collection over many years. It's not like I went out and bought this all at once. So yeah, you guys have asked for this video and I am more than happy to oblige. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's, I guess, start with pencils and stuff. Yeah. Okay, for my sketches, I typically just use a regular mechanical pencil. I don't really need anything too fancy. A lot of the time I'll use these Paper Mate clear points. They're very inexpensive. You can pretty much get these at any Target or drugstore, and I typically use HB just because I like to pull up the pencil with a kneaded eraser. I very rarely, if at all, use a white eraser. I almost always use a kneaded eraser. This one is the General's brand. This is also relatively inexpensive. I like them because they don't pull up the paper. I will also use sometimes different colored lead. These are the Prismacolor Col-Erase. This one is very well loved. When my pencils get too short, I have a pencil extender. When I was a kid, I always was like, what, that doesn't make sense. Why do you need a pencil extender? That doesn't make any sense. Well, I was young and I hadn't gone through many art supplies. If you don't want a sharpenable pencil, I recommend these. I think the Pilot Eno, yeah, the Color Eno clickable colored pencils. They are relatively inexpensive, but the lead is like $15. But yeah, I actually really like them. They go on smooth. The only thing is they're a little bit hard to erase. They definitely leave quite a bit of pigment behind. To outline my work, if I ever do outline or add little black details, oops, I use the Micron Pigma pens with black ink. I also have some with sepia. The ink is archival and waterproof, and they've never let me down, so why buy anything more expensive when those work great for me? I don't use this as much anymore because I found an alternative, but to add like small white highlights, I used to use this all the time, which is the Uniball Signo in white, and this one's just kind of a little extra misfit. This is just a dropper. Oh, there was water in it. This is just a little water dropper. I've got quite a few of them because sometimes I'll use them for ink as well. And then here is like a little random aside because this was in the pencil pile. This is liquid frisket or masking fluid, which basically it's liquid latex that's safe for watercolor paper. It's not gonna tear up the paper. And then this is the little applicator I made. From where you're looking, it looks like a paintbrush. When I first used it, I dipped it in the liquid frisket and kind of shaped it. It's like solid. And every time I use it, it kind of builds up, so I have to like trim the edges every single time. But this is for tiny little details. Say you have to lay down a full wash and there's a bunch of tiny little details you wanna skip and leave white. Well, you put this on those little details and let it dry, and they will be protected from the water. Why don't we move on to ink? Doopy-doo, booty-boo. Okay, so for black ink, I use the Black Cat Blick Waterproof India ink most of the time. This is a relatively large bottle for me, but they come in like these giant gallon bottles. It's actually really inexpensive and I really love it. The Higgins Ink, if I use too much of these Higgins inks, the smell of it gives me this like powerful nauseating migraine, and I can't with it. So this is the alternative, but I kind of like it better. So the Higgins inks, here's some colored Higgins inks. I like them a lot. I like that they come with a dropper, but yeah, I can't stand the smell, so I have to use them in small amounts. And then here's my famous FW Daler and Rowney acrylic ink. This is like the most opaque white thing I have ever purchased. More opaque than Copic's opaque white, in my opinion. So I love this packaging, obviously, because it comes with a dropper. The only thing is, I squirt the ink out into these little caps. I get the Kirkland waters from Costco. So instead of buying like a separate inkwell, I just put my ink in these caps. I reuse them. When you put this in here, it's very liquidy. Hold on. So what I do, I guess that's not too liquidy. I'm a klutz. I let it sit out a little bit before I use it so it can get really opaque. It gets kind of thick and custardy. That's not the word I wanted to use, but yeah, that's what I choose 9 times out of 10. And like, okay, hold on. I have to bring it back into frame to prove a point. I know you're just supposed to leave the white of the paper and paint around it or use the liquid frisket, which I do sometimes. But sometimes for me, it's just a completely different look to add the white back into the painting. And I find that look a little bit more attractive. So sue me, kill me. All right, now for the part of the video that I would say is probably the most exciting, which is my watercolor palettes. Let's start with the oldest one. Yes, let's start with the oldest sibling. This is my White Nights palette. Man, yeah. This is my laminated with packing tape color chart thing. This is not the original packaging it came in. It had like a white plastic packaging. I just decided to add them to this tin. They've been through some things. That's why the yellows are a little contaminated. There's like dog hair embedded in some of them. Thank you, Osa. I love these guys. They've been very much well loved, and they will continue to be very well loved. I love my babies. I don't know what to say other than I love my babies. Let's do second oldest, which are my Don't Judge My tin covered in stickers. This is my Schmincke Horadam palette. The actual tin has been through quite a lot, so it doesn't want to close all the way anymore, so I'm going to have to move them into a different palette. Here's my actually professionally laminated color swatch chart, and it's actually Velcroed on, and a lot of the time when I'm painting, I'll have it resting up here somewhere so I can see what colors I'm choosing. These are also very much well loved. Man, that's really contaminated. That's gonna bother me. Just give me 1 minute. I just need to clean it a little, okay? Don't judge me. Get that out. Pretend I'm not here, just cleaning. Okay, that was gonna drive me nuts. Still use it all the time. Here is my Core, some Winsor & Newton, and Daniel Smith watercolor palette, which I use very, very frequently. I also have some old Holland colors right here. And I think this one singular Holbein color. Yeah, I use this a lot. This is like my handmade palette. Actually, this is really held up. Even though it's kind of an inexpensive plastic, it's actually really, really done well over the years. I absolutely love Core. As you guys know, they are one of my absolute favorite brands of watercolors ever, at least of the big brands. Let's go on to my current favorite palette over here, which is the Regina watercolor palette. These are handmade by my friend Regina. I will link her website in the description down below, and I go much more into detail about how much I love these watercolors in next week's video. This is my absolute favorite palette right now. Like, I can't. Look at these colors. They are so unique, perfect for florals. Like there's so many greens. I've just really been playing with this watercolor palette and being ridiculously impressed. So this is my current fave. Already working through that brown there. Okay, now on to sparkly palettes. You guys ask me about these all the time, and they're always in the description. These are the Finetec pearlescent watercolors. These were a little bit of an investment, not too crazy. I believe all 3 of these were like $65, $70, and that's a really good price for this many watercolors considering. Now, I don't really use these on their own. I will use them on top of the set specifically, on top of already laid down pigment, just because, I mean, it's just, it's very slight. The reviews are mixed, but only because I think people use them thinking that they can just use them straight out of the pan and they're going to be bright, vivid colors. Same with these, but that's not the case. These are really meant to be used either mixed with other watercolors or on top of already dry, flat pigment. And then obviously my most asked about and my most used one is this one, their gold palette. This is best pony. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This is amazing. I highly recommend it. If you don't want to buy all the stuff to do foiling and gold foiling, this is an amazing alternative. However, I do not believe these are archival. I'm not entirely sure. I love these. I highly recommend them, especially this gold palette. Now for my newest baby, which is a limited edition Paul Rubens palette. it came in, look at this box is gorgeous. Came in this box. I think the cloth is, yes, still in here. It came with this, look at that. These babies are beautiful. And then it came wrapped in this gorgeous, it's actually a microfiber, giant microfiber cloth, which I thought was kind of funny. But look at that bright freaking pink palette. Do you see that? Oh, cute. And then, I haven't taken off this flap yet, but yeah, these are awesome. You definitely have to let them soak though. Like trying to do it right out the pan is not gonna work. You spritz them, let them sit for about a minute, and then they're just like, I mean, do I need to explain? It's beautiful. Their gold is not as good as the Finetec gold, but yeah, a lot of these colors are very unique. It's not really anything that's close to what's in this palette, so I didn't feel like I was doubling up on anything. And Lord knows I use glitter and sparkly so much that like these will get used. And this was also like a very unnecessary buy for me, but it's just like I couldn't get over how pretty the packaging was, and it was pink, and it was pink. It was just so cute, and I had to splurge and get it. And I did this wrong. Ignore me and my idiocy. So let's talk about things that I use to just add little details to my paintings, things that are not necessarily watercolor related. And we'll start with gouache, which, I mean, gouache is just opaque watercolor, essentially. The love child of acrylic and watercolor. I'll sometimes do a full painting with gouache, but not as much anymore. What I've been doing is, using gouache to add a little bit more interest to my watercolor pieces. Like in the last painting I did, I used some gouache to add little tiny threading details. I use Winsor & Newton gouache, and this gouache that I got off of Wish, it was really inexpensive, but it actually works really, really great, called Marie's. I know it's been around for a really long time, but I was super impressed with it. So yeah, if you like to shop on Wish and you're looking for a good gouache. And then also my little set of Holbein gouache, which I feel like Holbein is my favorite out of all of these, but it's really expensive. So an alternative is this Marie's gouache, which I like just as much. Next, I like to use watercolor pencils to add depth sometime. I'll go back in. It's just kind of a very easy way to add shadows and things like that. I've been told it can be like a crutch to use these on top of a finished watercolor piece, but it's like it's a shortcut. Like it's getting my painting to where I want it to be, so I don't really care if it's a crutch or not. These are my new watercolor pencils that I got for Christmas from my husband, and then these are the ones that I've been using. You know, I don't know which I prefer. Right now, I don't like the way that the Derwent ones feel. I don't like the ridges on them. I don't know why, and I don't know why that's such a big deal for me, but if it just feels strange in my hand, it's very difficult for me to really get into using them. Maybe I just need to kind of wear them down a little bit more, who knows. But they're good. They're good. They were higher rated than the Prismacolor, but I actually really enjoy the Prismacolor watercolor pencils. No offense, Mike, I love using them. They're really, really pigmented and pretty. It's just I find myself reaching for my Prismacolor ones a little bit more right now. And speaking of Prismacolor being a brand, colored pencils used to be my main medium, and that was the one that I was like, I could use them no problem. And to this day, like, I feel very comfortable using colored pencils. But a lot of the time I will use these Prismacolors to come in over my watercolors and add texture, or, you know, maybe do the shading with the Prismacolors. I feel like recently they've kind of gotten a lot of flack. It's like, they're so expensive and they're really not that good. And I like them fine. They're really nice and buttery. They can get a little waxy, but for me, between this and like the Faber-Castells, I actually prefer the Prismacolors. I don't know what it is. I like them a little bit better. Maybe it's because I've been using them for longer, so I'm more comfortable. Who knows? So there's that. Now let's talk about paper and sketchbooks. So this is my sketchbook, but something a little bit better came along. I will still use this. I think I'll use this for thumbnails, for paintings, ideas for paintings. This is the Moleskine drawing. I think it's the A4 size sketchbook. Comes with a lot of pages, so it's it takes a minute to fill it up. That was my main sketchbook, or was going to be, until this sketchbook by B Paper came along. I have a video collaboration with B Paper coming up, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I've used B Paper for years, and regardless of the collaboration or not, I just want you guys to know that I am 100% trust and recommend pretty much all their products. I've used tons and tons and tons of their products over the years. First of all, it's square, and something about square sketchbooks just gets me right, and it's filled with 100% watercolor paper. I have a hard time finding watercolor journals that are filled with 100% watercolor paper that are not like the Strathmore faux leather bound ones. Like the one thing I don't like about the Moleskine is that you have to break the spine to get it to lay flat, and I don't like breaking a spine. So when a sketchbook comes along that's spiral bound, that has 100% watercolor paper, that's square, I'm going to choose that one. So this one is the one I've been filling up. This one will see use, of course. I won't abandon you. So now let's talk about paper. Like I said before, almost all of my watercolor pieces are on B Paper, 100% watercolor paper. But that's pretty much all I use right now. I will occasionally use the Strathmore 500 series Ready Cut watercolor paper, which is also 100% cotton. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't love it as much as I love the B Paper. It is cold press, but ew, sorry. My hair, dog hair, everybody's hair everywhere. It's supposed to be cold press, but it doesn't have, the B Paper doesn't have a lot of texture either, but it's there, and it's definitely noticeable. Yeah, it's hard to see. I feel like this texture, it pills up a lot easier than the B Paper, which is kind of irritating. I feel like it doesn't handle, oh, it's this fuzzy butt hair. Man, it is in there. I feel like it doesn't handle as much water as it should. Like, it works fine if you're not really using tons and tons and tons of water. The B Paper will sometimes buckle if you're using tons and tons and tons of water, because both of these are a little bit thinner, but the B Paper texture is just a little bit more equipped to handle layers and layers and layers, where this one I just feel like really isn't. Sorry, Strathmore. Now those are kind of a little bit on the pricier side. B Paper, not so much. I'd say B Paper is relatively affordable for 100% cotton paper. If you it's not in the budget to get that kind of watercolor paper, and if you absolutely cannot find 100% cotton watercolor paper that is within your budget, the Strathmore 400 series, or even their 300 series, which is the yellow one, work okay. It's not highly absorbent, but you know, they work. They work for practicing, they work for small pieces. It says I got it for $10, but Hobby Lobby always has a like 20% off one item coupon. So there's that, and then you can always find these on sale, like buy two get one free. There's always good sales going on at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Blick, wherever. So I would recommend this one, or even the 300 series would work. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to go over brushes. These are all meant for watercolor. In my video for 15 tips for watercolor beginners, I explicitly say do not buy those multi-use brushes. Now, some brands of multi-use brushes will work, but typically if it says something like it's meant for watercolor and acrylic, it's not true, because these watercolor brushes are typically a lot softer and more flexible, more absorbent than acrylic. If it's at all possible for you, please get watercolor brushes. Even if you can only afford one, get a number 6 if you do smaller paintings, and then maybe like a number 8 if you do bigger paintings. So my most used brushes on camera are going to be these Princeton 4050 Heritage watercolor brushes. They are synthetic, so there is no real hair. I like my brushes to have a lot of snap. I like them to be firm. I've had these brushes, I think, for 6 or 7 years, so there is a tiny bit of wear, especially to this one here. It's losing its shape a little bit. It's not at all in the realm of needing to be replaced. But yeah, I love these guys. I really recommend them. They are very expensive though for what you get. Princeton is expensive. I feel like you can get something just as good for a little bit cheaper, which brings me to the Blick Studio brushes. These are specifically meant for watercolor. There is some wear and tear to these brushes even though I haven't had them as long. I'm sorry, but they look exactly the same and they function exactly the same. And it's not even the end of the world, especially for watercolor, if there is a little bit of wear and tear on your brush because squirt, squirt, squirt. Boom. You got a tip. It's not the end of the world, especially for watercolor brushes, if there's some poofage going on. For larger washes, I use the Black Velvet watercolor brushes with the silver band. These are actually incredibly affordable for mixed hair brushes because there's squirrel mixed with synthetic. They're soft, they're very fluffy, and they're great for big washes. All right, lastly, I have this little guy, and it is an Artist Loft. I don't know if Vienna is like the style of brush, I don't know. And I think this is technically for acrylic detailing, but it's this beady thing, and it's perfect for ink for me, doing like really fine, tiny ink details. Okay, and the very last two things I have here are this tiny little squirt bottle. I actually got this at a Sally Beauty Supply, but it's like, look how tiny. And it's got a little locking mechanism, but I've had it for years. Anytime I've thought I've lost it, it's like broken my heart. So this bitty little spritz bottle, and then this chunk of Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. And the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser is to clean my palette like very thoroughly once I'm done using it. I don't like to save my colors because I use very specific color palettes and I don't typically reuse them. If I'm painting florals, then sure, maybe I'll save a green or two, but typically when I'm done, I spritz my tin and then I get a paper towel or a cloth and I wipe it clean, and then any stains that were left behind, I get this wet and then I scrub the stains out. So if you are a watercolor artist and you don't have a little sliver of magic eraser, what are you doing with your life, man? Like, get out there, get some Mr. Clean in your life. Get that clean D. But anyway, guys, those are my art supplies. I did spend a little time talking about what was good about it, what wasn't good, cheaper alternatives and things like that. Obviously, if I use them on a regular basis, then I really do like them. If you guys have any questions about any of the products, please leave the questions down below and I will try to get to you if possible. Usually, I'm really good at responding to questions that first and second day after I post a video. As the videos get older, I start to respond a little bit less because it's a little harder to keep up with. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to stay out of trouble. See you guys later. This video was brought to you by viewers like you. If you'd like to support the channel, please go to www.patreon.com/EmilyArtful. Thanks again for watching.